Okay, I think we'll kick off here. Thank you once again for everyone joining us today, taking time out their day. Much appreciated. Firstly, a little housekeeping. Everyone will be muted for the session. However, we will have questions and answers at the end, and please feel free to ask and pose any questions throughout the session today via the chat functions on your GoToMeeting panel. We will also be recording the session, so please be aware of that. I also have Vishal with me. Hello, Vishal.
Everybody. Hey, everybody.
Great, thank you. If you could pop the next slide up.
Okay.
So, why us? There are 4 key pillars to our business. ERP and accounting, which is where Sage 200 sits. Cloud. So we lift and shift traditional on-premise servers and infrastructure into a modern cloud-based workspace for our clients. We also offer managed IT, where we support our clients' day-to-day IT needs and those clients that wish to remain on-premise IT infrastructure, and CRM. At the heart of those 4 pillars is digital transformation. A digital transformation strategy is not just about technology, however. It's about people, processes, security, data, innovation, and much more. So please do let us know if we can help you with any of this moving forwards. We will be more than happy to. Next slide, please, Vish. And over to Vishal for the training agenda.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Okay, guys, I'm Vishal Karavadra. I'm one of the Sage 200 consultants at Experience. And we're going to go through the second tips and trips training session that we've got. This one's going to concentrate around the system administration area. So it's not going to be as big as the other 2 sessions I've done with Power BI and the first tips and tricks, but I think it'll be useful for people because when I'm out on site, it's, a lot of people don't really use the system administrator, or if they do, it's very rarely, and they don't really know exactly all of the little bits that are in there. So today, that's what I'm going to be running through. And hopefully by the end of it, you'll have a very good idea of how to use the system administrator if you're new to it, and possibly some little bits in it that you didn't realize that are actually there, or allow you to do small little changes in the system. Okay, so I'm just going to pop over to my virtual machine. So you should now see my computer. So I'm just go back to the desktop, and I'm just going to come up to here. And yeah, right. Okay, so this is my virtual machine, and I'm going to fire up the system administration icon. So normally you'd have the Sage 200 for normal users, but if you're doing any administration, you have this system administration application. So when we log into here, it's an area where you set up users, you set up your companies, you set up roles, certain features in the functions, and then obviously users, when they log into Sage, they have the access to the correct companies and they have access to the correct features in Sage. So certain people will only need to see certain areas, other people will need to see more than others. So while this is just logging in, when we set up Sage 200, Sage changed the way it works in some of the later versions. It now requires IT to get involved when we are actually creating users. So this is something that's a little bit technical, but if you do create new users in Sage, when we implement it, there's these 2 groups that get created in the back end, the Sage 200 admins group and a Sage 200 users group. We require that to create the actual Sage 200 server. All users of Sage have to be entered by IT into this Sage 200 users group. So they're your normal users. So that's one step you need to get users to do. If you've got a new user coming into the company, IT would have to come in and add the user into this Sage 200 users group before the system administrator would accept it and allow you to create that user. Similarly, you have an admins group. So this is how it's controlled, who's an administrator of Sage. So any user that needs to do administration, they need to be part of this Sage 200 admins group. So if you're new to Sage and creating users, then first step is when your user gets its user profile in a new computer, at that step, you should let IT know, can you please add those users into either the users group or the Sage 200 admins group, depending on what role they have. So it's a little bit in the back end of how the system's set up. So if I come back to the application, so this is the Sage 200 system administrator application. You have on the left, you've got a toolbar here, which gives you your licensing information, the companies that you set up in Sage. So I've only got one in my case, which is the demo company. A users area where you set up all different types of users you possibly have in the system. A roles area where you would create all of your roles. Features, so these are all normal features that you see in Sage, so normal access, normal menus, normal reports, but you can come in here and add new custom reports. Let's say if you create your own report in Sage, this is where you'd go and add it. Logging information, this is something more for support, for errors we may have. An add-on section, so in here, let's say if you've got third-party add-ons from somebody such as Sycon, this is where you'd add add-ons into the system to extend functionality, or if we do any development or extend the functionality that way, we would add add-ons within here. Active users section would show you who's logged on, username, an email, and what host. So sometimes if you need to track down if someone's left a session open, you can come into here, see which session is open and what computer it's open on, and then you'd have to go and track down that computer and get that session logged off. Area on messaging, so Sage allows you to set up email settings so it can do its automatic emailing, and in here you would put in your email server details, and then that's where Sage can then now use these email details to then send out automatic emails via Sage, such as purchase order authorization. Core components, so these are the core components of Sage: commercials, bill of materials, different components you may have. So depending on your licensing, you can see which core components that you have set up in the system. Information management, again, this is more back-end, it's just models and data sources of how Sage connects up to the system. Online payments, you can use Sage Pay or vendor accounts to do payments in Sage system. You sign up to their service. Once you sign up to them services, then you can use Sage Pay to do online transactions within the system. Office 365 integration allows you to set up Office integration with Sage 200. It's pretty new. It's hard to demo because we have to have a full Office account licensing, and we can't do it via our company account. I would have to set one up in a test system and get into licensing issues and so forth. But what it allows you to do is have contact information within Outlook and your email, so you can then see users of Sage, also customers in Sage, balances and so forth. So it's a way of linking your Outlook to the account system to then see some, information regarding contacts and customers and suppliers you may have within Sage. Also, on top of that, there's a bit of document management it allows you to do. So any PDFs you generate in Sage, it uses Office 365 to then put that either onto OneDrive, a shared location, or some sort of document holding area. And then finally, you have Sage API. So the API, again, you sign up for from Sage, and it allows developers to then talk to Sage API via the back end to then do programming or further customization to Sage. Okay, so they are the modules that you see on the side here. You will only use a few of these for day-to-day job, mainly going to be your company, your users, and your roles. Okay, so we've talked about creating the users. I talked about how you would create the users in the computer management section in AD. So IT would have to add the relevant users to the groups before you can then create them in Sage. Once IT has added somebody in either of these groups, when you log on to System Administrator, it pulls up an update users window. Now I can manually pull that up by right clicking on the users and going to update users. This is the same function that would happen as soon as you fire up System Administrator and Sage picks up that there's something new gone into those AD groups, and then it will come up with this manage users list. Now, if there was a new user, you would see the new username in this list, and at the top in the status, it would say new. So all you have to do is just hit OK, and then it will create that new user and put that user into your users list. If I now come out of here and then go over to my users list, okay, so in here, double click on this user. Okay, so we now have this screen where we have our users. So your new user would come into this list. You can then double click on that user to then go and configure that user's properties. So there's various tabs: the general tab, user details, member of, company access, and API. So in this screen, you can have enabling the user or disabling the user if you need to disable it if it's someone that's left. This can edit menu means that the user can actually go and add new features into his menu. So let's say if I create a brand new report and I need to get that into the menu in Sage, you need to have this option open. I'm going to look at this a little bit later in a bit more detail. Options to edit workspaces. So in one of my tips and tricks sessions, I talked about workspaces, and in there, you can edit these. So there is ways of customizing workspaces. We can develop them or create new ones, but that option is something you need if you want to go and get into that workspace designer. Receiving emails and is a web user. So web user allows this user to log on via the web browser if you've got a web license, and then you can check workspaces and certain reports via a web browser rather than actually needing to log into Sage. Okay, so under user details, we've just got name, telephone, email, fax, job number, manager name and address. There's some info you can link against it. The email would be a key one if you're going to start doing automatic emailing to a particular user of Sage. Member of, so here is the member of the roles. So depending on which roles we create, you can assign a role to a user. Now, in the old days, you could assign 3 roles to a user, and then in Sage, you can go to an option and say change it from role 1 to role 2, and you would only see what's in those roles. But Sage, a few versions back, changed the way it works, and basically, depending on what role you give the user, they're just going to see a combination now. So if I've got a sales ledger role and a purchase ledger role, if I assign both of those to one user, when they log in, they'll see both the sales ledger and the purchase ledger functions. Before, you would have had to have switched. Okay, then we've got company access. So my mouse has gone over, there it is. Okay, so company access, in this tab, you can have available companies. And if you've got 5, you can assign 2 to a particular user or all of them. Or if it's a user that always has access to every single company, regardless of what's set up in the system, you can just tick this box and this user will always get access to any company that's in the system. Finally, we have the API. So if you do use the Sage API, this is something you just need to go and authenticate with the Sage ID if the user is going to be a web API user. Okay, so that is how you see a user's list. In the back end of the user's list, you've got some visual information to let you know if it's enabled or disabled. So sorting on this column is good. If they're web users, or if they're API users, or if they have admin access. You also see what role they're part of from here, so you can very clearly see which roles they're all part of, and you've got their system names. Okay, so that is basically your users section. After that, we've got our roles. Now, when I go in to train people on roles, or if I go and do upgrades and you know, bring them up to the latest version from whatever version they're on, it's very surprising that people may have changed in the company over time when it originally got set up, and then, you know, I've come in and there's new people there at the company now. So they sometimes weren't part of creating the roles in the first instance, and sometimes they don't even know what roles are actually in the system. So it's a good idea that somebody is keeping an eye on your roles, and, you know, just seeing what people have access to. Have they got access to everything they should have, or is there things that are missing? So if you come into your roles, you can visually see what roles you've got in the system. Like I said, from the users list, you can see which are being used. So if there's nothing actually being used from here, you know that these roles are redundant. Okay, so I'd always look at the users list first, look at what roles are assigned, and then go and review these roles. Okay. So when you're reviewing roles, how do you do this? So if I come into any of these and I just double click on them, when you double click, it only gives you the general area. So it's a name. Do they have alerts, or is it a remote users only group? Remote users only group means that you set up a group for remote users. In that group, the users are sort of back-end users, service account users, not people that actually ever go and work in Sage, but sometimes you have a service account that needs to do jobs in Sage. So that's what we call these remote user roles. So it's not an actual user, it may be a service account needing to access Sage to grab some information to put somewhere else. Okay, so when you double click, you've got the general, but then you have the users. So on the double click, you can only assign users to this role. Okay, it's not actually what are the features of the role. So it's something that can be a bit confusing, because you'd probably think that when you double click on it, you can access the features, but only thing you can do is assign the users and say if it's a remote only group. The way you assign the features is on right click. So you need to right click on the role and then go to features. You can copy roles. So if you've got a very similar role that needs more advanced features, you don't need to recreate it. You can copy roles and then add the new functions to that if other people have more functions than others. Saves you a little bit of time. Or if you're going to strip off functions, same thing. Copy the role and then remove functions for other users if they don't need all of them. It will save you time doing it that way. But if I come to features, this is one tedious screen that somebody has to go through at some point, I would say, because it's a one-off job. So once you've set the role and you've assigned all of the actions in that role, then that's it, it's done. And you know, you've kept an eye on it and you've done it. So I'm not going to go through every single function, but the way it works, it's per module. So you'll see that this is the sales ledger module, purchase ledger module, nominal and cash book. So that's financials, stock control, price book, sales order processing, purchase order processing, that's commercials. If you have project accounting module, then you add additional items. So depending on what licensing you've got, depends on what you should be ticking here. This list will not get smaller, regardless if you've only got financials. You will still go and see everything here. So how do I recommend users start to set this up? Now, if I just tick the features at the very top and then untick, it's now removed every single function. There is nothing ticked now. If I tick features, everything is fully ticked. So there's one little trick that I tend to recommend to use people. So if you want to give everything to everybody, you would just tick this button. That means everything has now been assigned. If I now want to unassign things, I can just come to the root of these levels and say they don't have sales order processing, they don't have purchase order processing. So I'm just going to get rid of the root. Clicking on the root will remove everything below it. Okay, so that's a good little trick. Just come through and just, okay, they don't do stock, they don't do cash book, they don't do nominal. So this person really only works in the sales ledger and the purchase ledger, let's say. So I'll get rid of everything else. So I'm going to actually do it from the top. Take it from the top, get rid of everything, give them sales, give them purchase. Okay, so if I check these now, you'll see that only the sales ledger and the purchase ledger is checked. Now, how did they group these up? So within the ledgers, they put it into 4 main sections. All of your reports that you have in this module, all of the basic functions you have in this module. So these are sort of, you know, not advanced functions, as Sage calls them. They'd say basic type functions, you know. Then they group them into advanced functions. So these are a little bit more advanced. You might want to be a little bit careful if you want to give writing off small amounts of writing off customer bad debt to a particular user. It may be something a little bit higher up that wants to do this or change the statuses of accounts. Okay. And then finally, you have like an admin setup type area. So this would be more of a administration, exporting data, importing data, things like that is kept within the admin area. So they're the 4 main areas you'll always find with whichever module, main modules you're going to be looking in. And like I said before, if you want to give everybody all the reports or no reports, just uncheck it. So now this person has the sales ledger, has the basic functions, advanced and admin, but has no reports. If he is going to have some reports, you can tick from the root and then just go and turn off reports that you may not have. So this is again saving you times of ticking reports. Check majority of them and then uncheck the ones that you don't want. If it's the other way around, so they only have 2 reports rather than all of them, then do it the other way. Tick them all, uncheck them, and now only assign the 2 reports they have. Okay, so there's a little bit of tips on very quickly getting these tick boxes all in. If they have more than about 90% of the items within the folder, tick the folder and then remove the 10%. If they only have 10% in the folder, then clear the whole folder down and then just add the 10% they do have. Okay, so there's a little way of speeding up assigning these roles. Again, so reports and letters and layouts, all of these are within your reporting section. Again, open up your basic, and if there's something in here you think, okay, they don't need, just go and uncheck them slowly one by one. And then once you've done a little bit of work, another tip, hit the apply button, meaning that you're not going to lose any of your changes that you've been doing on this particular role that you're working on. Okay. Now, very, very important area here to keep an eye on that I always force people to always check and always do. There's a few functions in Sage that they have in there that are generally there for only testing type purposes. When we implement a system, they have sort of delete and purge functions in there, which should never ever be in a live system because potentially people can go and delete transactions and then mess up the books. So the last step, once you set up anybody's role, is to come into this feature name area here and just do a search. You can search for functions in here. So if you're ever going to find a particular function, start to type the name of the function you're looking for and then hit filter. If you press enter, it's going to close this window. So it's really annoying. I do it all the time. I hit enter after I type the name, but that will close this window. So don't press enter and click on this filter button. So what I've said is show me in this role everything that's got delete within it. So now it's going through all the modules and saying, look, here's where we found delete. So in the sales ledger, here is that delete customer transaction. This should never be on. To untick it. Suggested supplier payments is the only suggested payments. If you do payment runs in purchase ledger, you know that it creates a suggested file and then it looks at what payments should be suggested, and you can clear that file and create a new one. So that is a safe delete option to have, the only one. Everything else, remove. You'll see that all of the others are deleting actual items from Sage. So that's the first item you need to check. Apply that. And then the second one to check is purge. P-U-R-G-E, and filter. And here we go. So again, there's purge transactions in sales, there's purge transactions in supplier, and all the rest are clear. So again, they're the two checks that I always recommend people do. Do not leave those in the system by accident. Okay, so that is mainly the key bits that you need to do when you're doing your role. It's definitely one job that somebody has to do at some point. It's a bit of a tedious job, but you need just to come in and assign the relevant bits that the users need. And the key area to remember is if you tick the root of the main header, it will tick everything below it. If you untick the main header, it's going to remove everything below it. Okay, so if they have, like I said before, majority of the items, tick the header and then untick the ones they don't have. If they don't have majority of the items, then tick it, untick it, and then just give them the few items that they should be having. Okay, so I hope that helps or understand or speeds up looking at your roles and, you know, setting them up, because then it tidies up the user's menu when they're actually working in Sage. They're not seeing stuff they shouldn't be seeing. They've not got any dangerous features, and hopefully it speeds them working through their normal menu. Okay, so what else do we just, if I just go back into there, you can, there was one other thing you can do is to put it into a flat file, which I don't know many people that use, but if you don't like this tree structure, you can say put it in flat file, and then you can just run through the list up and down. But again, it's a little bit tedious. I think I find it more tedious running through the list this way than having it, but it's better to have it in the tree view, I believe. Okay, right, so what have we got next? So we've done the company, we've not done companies. Let's have a quick look at the companies now. So the company setup, in here you can come in, right click, add new companies, and then it brings you up into the new company screen with relevant tabs that you have at the top. So you give it a company name. You have to give it an attachments folder, which is generally a shared network folder that sits in the Sage share that's on the Sage server. This is where all your data is held centrally, and in here we normally have an attached folder, and then this is the share folder that we would assign to it. So this would be a shared folder if I checked its properties, and this is the name we would have to type into there. Okay. After that, we select the server settings. Where is my database that I'm going to connect up to, or am I creating a new one? So this would be your SQL Server instance and your database name. So what I'm going to do is just quickly go into my demo data. So double click on it. Okay, so here's one that's already been set up. So we've got the name, we've got the shared path. This is the SQL Server instance, and this is my Sage database name. Whenever you make any changes in here, which I'm going to do in a moment, you have to hit this test button. If you test it, it tests the connection and tells you what version you're running right now. And you update if you're going to do any upgrading of the system or add new features into the system via the add-ons area. You have to update all the companies to grab all of that later information. You can see the members that are part of this company. So here you would see who can access this particular company. Has online payments ever been set up on this particular company for the Sage Pay and stuff like that I was saying? And then there's a company usage tab right at the end, but that's just for company contact information. So generally in here, members will tell you who's actually the key users of this company. In general, at the bottom, They added this recently, which came in quite a few versions back, but again, some people didn't realize they were there, some people didn't use it. So it's more for people that are multi-company, more than one, and it basically gives you a visual indicator. When you're in Sage using your forms, you can say, show me a colored bar, and you can set a color, and you can say, show me the name. So basically, what is the company I'm working in? So if I just turn those two bits on, like I said, if you make any changes in here, if I now hit OK, it's going to say, oh, actually, bypass that. I thought it was going to give me a message. Normally when I change it, okay, there we go. So I made a change, and it should say you need to test the company. So if you get this message coming up when you've made any changes, all that means is you need to hit this test button. So I'm just going to tick that back and then hit test. Now it's passed this test. Now I can come out and say that's saved. So what has that done? So if I just log into Sage now, normally when you log into Sage, the only place you'd see the company name is in the very top toolbar. That was your only indicator of what company you're actually working in. And that is this name here. So when you're in a form or when you're doing something, putting an invoice on or creating customers, it doesn't tell you what company you're in at that point. As soon as I tick those options that I've just done in the system administrator, now when I'm doing any job in Sage, fire up a window, now we've got the colored bar, and now we've got the company name. So if you did have two companies running, or you've got more than one company and you're doing some work, or you've got a testing company, that would be your indicator of which company you're actually working in. So if you've got more than one company, I'd definitely recommend setting up the colors so you can see visually which companies you're working in. And even if you've got testing companies, have your main company a certain color and have your testing company another color, and it visually lets you know what companies you're working in. Okay, right. So the other key areas that I wanted to talk about is features. Now, in Sage, you have all of your normal features. So these look like the same things as what we see when we was configuring the roles. It's all of the areas you see in Sage, all of the reports you get in Sage. Now, when you have new add-ons or new development, we would add features into here for new forms and so forth. But a user may want to add, let's say, typically a new report they may have created into the system. So this is the area where you would come in and you can create your new reports. So I've got a few ones created here already, but what I'm going to do in this custom report, I'm going to right click and just say add new feature. You give it a feature name, you would say it's a new report. New report, and then you just echo the screen. Now within custom report, we have our new report, and at the bottom we can assign targets. So we come into the target, we would say add, we would give it a name, so this would be the new report name. You would say what is it that we were connecting up to. So there's various different options, but the one that I'll show you is the report, and then you would go and navigate to where that report is in the system where you've saved it from the Sage Report Designer. If I just come out of these, and if I go to this outstanding orders report, edit this one, here you can see it's going to go and try and grab this particular report in the system. Okay, so if you remember earlier, once you've created your new reports using the report designer, you know where it is in the system. In the user, if you remember, I showed you that on the double click, we've got can edit menu. So you need to have this option to then finally add it into the Sage system. So step one would be to create the report. Step two would be to add the feature to the report, to the features section. Step three would be to then assign this feature to a role. So from here, you can do it on right click, or you could go to the role and add it via the role like I showed you earlier. So from here, you can right click and say, okay, assign this feature to a particular role. Or I could have just gone to that role and said assign it that way. So if I go back to my roles, go to DMC, remember it's on the right click. Oh, my mouse has jumped. Features, and now at the bottom, you see that it's already now signed that. But I could have come in and done it this way, either or. Okay, so first step, create the report. Step two, add it into the features. Step three, add it into your role. And then finally, a member of that person who's part of that role needs to come into Sage and hit this edit menu. This is the icon you will get once you say the user can edit that menu from the user properties. So once you do that, the main menu will come into green edit mode. You can then hit the plus button and say new folder or new item. If you want a group, you create the folder and then add the item in it, or say new item. Then Sage goes and looks at your features that you've got within the system administrator, and then from here you can go and find the new report that you've created. And then as soon as you assign that to the menu, it appears at the bottom. You can then close that menu down, and there is our new report that we've just created in Sage. Okay, so it's a little bit of a long step creating new reports, but that is how you would do it. You need to do it via the system administrator and via the features tab. Create the feature, assign it to the report, add it to your role. Once you've got it to your role, you can then add it into Sage, as long as you've got the option to say, I can edit the menu. Okay, the final bit that I just want to talk about is that I showed you how you can modify, I showed you how you can create a new report. But let's say if there was an existing report in the system, and you wanted to go and customize an existing report and just change it, you know, from this menu option, I just want to change the columns or change something around in it. The way you could do that is you'd fire up this report in the Sage Report Designer, and then you would, once it's fired up in the Report Designer, you do the changes to the report, and then when you save that report down is the key part. Okay, so if I just put up the File Explorer, go back to the Sage Share. In the Sage Share, you have a reporting section. This is where Sage holds all of its reports that you run from Sage. Now, they've done a clever thing there. The way it works, in default, if I go to Purchase Ledger, so default reports, and then purchase, here are all my purchase reports. Now in here, if I wanted a transaction listing, that would be in here. So here are the transactions. Now what you do is you create your report, you open it in Sage Report Designer, you make your changes, and then when you say save, you save it down, but you never save it in default. You keep the originals always in default. But when you go back from default, you have custom. In custom, you now have the same structure. So we go into custom, we go into reports, and we go into purchase. So this is exactly the same location as where I got it from. And then you save the report with exactly the same name as you had it in the original instance. So what Sage does, it actually comes in and says, okay, I'm first going to check in the company folder. Is there a report with that name in there? Yes, no. No, there isn't. So that would be company specific. In here, you would have individual company names, and then it would then follow the same structure down to the purchase. If there's nothing in there, it says, let me go and check in custom. So it would come in custom, it would come to reports, it would come to purchase, and it would look for that report with that name. If it finds it, it will use this report. So this is now your custom report. If it doesn't find it in here, it says, okay, there isn't a custom report. I'm going to go grab the report from default. Okay, so it's quite clever the way it does it. It very quickly enables you to make a modification to an existing Sage report. Fire up the report you want, make the change, and then just remember you just save it down in the same location under custom with the same name. As long as it's got the same name, Sage will now pick up your custom report. So these custom reports would go across all companies. So generally reports can go across all companies. A layout would generally be company specific. So we would save all of your layouts in here when we set up your layouts, when we set the system up, all with your company specific names. So it goes and picks out your correct logos for your correct companies. But reports generally can be across the board. So you can stick all your reports in the custom in the same location, and then you very quickly modified a default report to your custom one. Okay, so I hope that makes sense, but it's a little bit of the back end on people if they do stuff with a report designer. It's how it's structured in the back. You can just save it down in custom with the same name, and now that report is updated in the system. If you want to roll back, you just remove it from the custom folder, and now it's going to roll back and get the default. Okay, so I think I've more or less covered. Like I said, this was going to be a slightly smaller session than normal, because the system admin does have some bits to do in it, but you know, there's not a hell of a lot to cover within the actual system administrator. David, was there any questions that came through?
There are, yeah. Thank you, Vishal. It's a good session. There is one question which is actually stemming back to the hints and tips session 1. If I read that out to you, I changed the screen from the standard home menu to the nominal ledger / nominal list, and would like to change it back to the standard home screen that shows all the top level options. Please
Yeah.
advise on how I do this.
Okay, so I discussed this a little bit before. It's a little bit hidden, that area. So what you've done is you've said you've came over to the nominal and you right click and you've made that your home page. So if I then come out of Sage and then come back into Sage, it will take me to the nominal. But if you want to roll back, this is something that's a little bit hidden. I don't know why Sage put it here, but if I now want to get back to that application homepage, what you got to remember, it's this Sage 200 icon. It doesn't look like a button, but if you click on it, it then says show application homepage. That will then take you back to this application homepage. The first button will take you to what you set your homepage to be. So that will now take me to my nominal list. Okay. If you want to get back to the application, it's Sage 200. Show application homepage, and now we've got the main homepage. Okay, if you want to revert it all back to set this to be your homepage, then you say Sage 200 and reset my homepage. So now this button is your homepage, and if I now come back into Sage, it will now take me to the homepage rather than a nominal list. So I hope that makes sense. Is that Sage 200 text is an actual button. It's not very clear. It's a little bit hidden.
Perfect. Thank you, Vishal. If anyone else would like to ask any further questions, please do pop it into the chat functions. There is another though. Where is the Sage 200 SA folder located?
The SA folder. I'm not sure what you mean by SA. So do you mean the system administrator folder, the one that I've been talking through, this Sage share, as I called it? Is that the one you mean?
Potentially, yes. I'm not 100% certain. Yeah, I would imagine.
If you could just put a yes, no into the box, if that's the box,
yes,
if
it
that
is,
is
yes,
the box,
correct,
yes, yeah. Okay, so basically this is a shared location. So when we install Sage as consultants, we would install it on a Sage server, and we would decide where would you like your Sage share to be. So it's a question a little bit for your IT, but it would be a network location, which would be your Sage server name /Sage. Now, every single Sage user should have access to this folder. But what it is that when you go to save as from the report designer, it should take you to there anyway, because the report designer knows. Otherwise, it's a question for your IT. And basically, you type in the Sage server name /Sage into a web browser. So I know it's this one. You may need to get IT to ask. And then if you type that into the top here and press enter, it will just take you to where that Sage share is. But it's something that would have got set up when we installed Sage originally. It normally sits on your Sage server, and all the clients connect to it. So if you're a Sage user, you would not ever be able to get into Sage unless you can access this folder. So it's your Sage server name /Sage. I mean, obviously I don't know that for everybody, but that is where it sits. So it's a question for IT, and I should be able to give you that information quite quickly.
Brilliant, thank you. Another question. I use the favorites and have set up my home screen favorites. I wanted to give other users access to this, but have found out these have to be set up for individual users. Would I be able to create a menu for my company shortcuts and give this folder access to the sections of Sage that we use the most, so they are easy to access?
Yeah. Now, with the homepage favorites is something that I would have to do a little bit of a test with, but what you can do is that when you set up this favorites menu, so this is the one that I did from Tips and Tricks, you can basically, this is where your homepage favorites go, into this area. Okay, now once you set all of this up, what I'd recommend you do is right click on it, hit export. That was now going to export this structure to this favorites file, and you can call it whatever you like, new users favorites, new users list, however. Save that down on a network location, ideally, so you can then access that same file from the other computer when you go over to the other machine. Once you've saved that down, you then simply go over to the other user's computer who doesn't have that menu, come to the favorites area, right click and select import, and then go and import that file from where you saved it to, and then it will bring that entire structure in for this user. It will bring the structure into a folder. So if it doesn't bring them into this homepage favorites area, then all the user needs to do to configure this area is drag the items into this folder here, and then they'll see them here. And know that it will definitely bring in the whole structure into one folder for what you select outside of this. So anything new, because this is always here. The homepage favorites is there by default, and then you just start to add items into it. Everything else you create. So you can export and then import. So if you create a massive structure here, you can export it, save it, and then import that into the new user. If it doesn't put the items into here, then the user may just have to drag everything they're going to see in this homepage favorites area.
Brilliant, thank you, and thank you for those questions. Much appreciated.
Perfect.
Actually, we've got one other. So just on that same question, I did try to export the favorites, but because we use profiles which are synchronized, and this didn't seem to work.
Right, so it was a profile sync. So it didn't work at which point? When you was exporting, or when you were trying to import it back in?
I think we're just waiting for some typing. Hang on.
Or is it the location where you saved it? I'm just trying to think if it was where export option problem or actual import option problem.
I don't think we had a response to that as yet. Are there any other questions at all in the meantime? Oh, here we go. After they were exported, because the users are effectively roaming profiles, they didn't work because they were pointing to the individual user.
Okay, I may need to get a bit more info on that one because I'm still struggling to find out. I see what you mean with roaming profiles. It sounds like it could be an RDS or Citrix type environment. And is it a problem that when you save it, you can't find the file to put into the other user, or is it a problem when you're actually importing it for the new user that it then says that there's a problem?
I think you said happy to provide information. I think probably take this one offline.
I think so. I think this is probably something we can probably have a call or an email about.
Yeah, I think that'd be really good. Yeah, perfect. Okay. I don't think there are any other questions. So on to the last slide, Michelle.
Yep. Okay. So I'll just pop it back up a bit. Okay, and then over to here. Okay, so we've covered all the questions.
Okay, and finally, just a brief slide to let you know that there are additional sessions running across Office 365, Microsoft Teams, cloud, security, CRM, and sort of a general business intelligence session. So well worth a look. You can find them on experience-group.com/webinars. And please feel free to contact us, inquiries@experience-group.com. Alternatively, you'll have our emails from this morning. So please do keep in touch and let us know if there's anything else we can do to help. Finally, there will be a feedback form that will be coming your way. If everyone could sort of provide a basic bit of feedback, it wouldn't take long. It really helps us shape future webinars. Brilliant. Well, thank you kindly for everyone's time.
Thank you very much, guys. It's been a pleasure.
All the best. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.